I'll say it quietly, the way I'm used to speaking now, when the walls of my home listen to me better than people I once trusted. My house is old, creaky, almost as old as the wrinkles on my face. We grew up together, and it seemed, what could be more reliable? But then it turns out that both home and people sometimes become too comfortable for those who have long forgotten their conscience. Sometimes I think that old age isn't about years, it's about the moments when they stop listening to you. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The snow outside the window hadn't melted yet, even though it was already March, and the air smelled of meltwater, but also something unsettling, as if the air already knew that today I would have to endure much. I made myself some tea slowly, carefully, so as not to spill it. I sat by the window, as I had done all my life, and looked out onto the street, at the occasional cars, at the neighbors' children hurrying to school. And suddenly, I noticed my hand was shaking more than usual. I knew right away that something was wrong. Old age gives you a strange gift, the ability to sense trouble beforehand. People call it anxiety, but we older people know it. It's the heart's memory. The clock struck 8, and along with it, my old phone rang. The sound was sharp, unpleasant, as if alien. I flinched. It wasn't a friend, not a neighbor. It was him, my relative. Older, loud, confident, the kind who always considered himself the master of a place where he'd never been. "Did you get your pension?" he asked, without a greeting, without a pause, as if he were talking not to a person but to a meter. "Yes, this morning," I answered quietly, trying to speak evenly, without trembling. He didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't inquire if I'd eaten, or if I needed help. No, his concern for my life ended where the money began. And I, old fool, for a long time believed he simply wanted to help me manage them. But that day, something inside me seemed to break. "Then pack it. I'll come and pick it up. We need to settle a couple of accounts, you understand," he said. Did I understand? Oh, I understood too well. I'd been silent for too long, giving in for too long. I always thought, the main thing is peace. I don't want any arguments. We old people are so afraid of losing any connections that we allow others to step over us, like a doormat. Only today, for the first time, I felt pain not for myself, but for how easily I was being used. "I won't give it up," I said, unexpectedly even for myself. The words flew out quietly, but firmly, like a pebble finally toppled from a mountain. There was silence on the line, cold, oppressive. "What did you say?" His voice grew low, threatening, as if it were not his own, but a stranger's. "It's my money. I need it myself," I whispered. A pause. Prolonged. Dangerous. "I see. Then get ready," he said, and the connection was lost.
He sat motionless.
The clock ticked faintly, snow fell softly from the roof outside. The tea on the table had grown cold. Everything around me became somehow different, as if the house had shrunk, trying to hide me. But there was nowhere to hide. For the first time I felt not anxiety, no, but a deep, senile weariness. When you realize you're not allowed to live in peace, even in your own home. An hour later, there was a knock. Sharp, heavy like a blow. He could have rung the doorbell, but he chose to pound with his fist. That's not what guests do, but invaders. I slowly approached the door. I heard him talking to someone. The voices were rough, fast, irritated. Yes, he'd brought people. Young, confident, the kind who consider the elderly weak. "Open up," he shouted. I didn't open the door. I stood motionless, holding onto the door frame to keep from falling. The house around me seemed to breathe with me. The walls shook from the pounding. You choose. Either money or this house. You don't have enough for the utilities, you'll lose it soon anyway, so we'll help you. You'll live in my room, no big deal. And we'll sell the house. What do you need it for? He spoke louder and louder, as if selling someone else's property. But my late husband built this house, his hands, his life, his labor. And every crack in the wall is a memory. How could I give him up? Even for a second to think about it, it was like a knife. Go away, please, I said, barely audible. He laughed. It was cold, evil, not at all familiar. For the first time I understood, a person doesn't have to raise a hand to hurt. Then there was another knock, louder. It felt like the door was about to crack. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I regretted living alone. Loneliness is a hard thing, but it's even harder to be weak in the eyes of those who think they're stronger. Okay, you wanted it, he said. Come on, guys. The footsteps faded, but I knew this was only the beginning. And something inside me slowly but firmly switched on, as if nature had taken my youth, but in return gave me an instinct to survive, to protect what was mine. I walked over to the table, pulled out my old notebook, sat down, and slowly opened it. Between the pages lay a small piece of paper, the phone number of the technician who'd installed cameras on my porch and in the hallway 2 years ago. I'd installed them for peace of mind back then, but now they were my only hope. Oh, Lord, thank you, I whispered. I quietly turned on the monitor and saw the outdoor camera was working. My hands were shaking, but a strange, quiet sense of strength was growing inside. Old age isn't weakness. Old age is experience. And sometimes it's a weapon. And they had forgotten that. I closed my eyes, exhaled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could fight. Even if it was quiet, even if it was slowly, even if it was with trembling hands. But I could. And that was only the beginning. I sat motionless for a long time, as if the house had become either too quiet or too loud. I couldn't tell. When people leave, the noise of their angry voices lingers for a long time, like a cold draft. It sinks into the walls and sits there until it fades. I held onto the armrest of the old chair that knew more about me than all my loved ones, and listened to my heart slowly calm. An old heart, but stubborn like me. It was as if the house was listening along with me. It always did, ever since my husband and I moved in, young, laughing, foolish. Back then, the walls smelled of fresh plaster, youth, and hope. Now they smelled of time and memory. When I felt my hand stop shaking, I went to the monitor and rewound the recording. Their voices, their footsteps, their threats, all of it wasn't just sound. It was proof. And it felt strangely warm. Not joyful, no, but warm, as if someone had placed a hand on my shoulder and quietly said, "You are not alone. You can still protect yourself." I called the lawyer, whose number I'd long ago saved, just in case. We old people often collect such numbers, doctors, handymen, social workers, and hope we'll never have to use them. Hello. His voice was sleepy, as if I'd woken him, even though it was already midday. I need a consultation, I said quietly. It's about my house, and about what they want to do to me. He asked me to tell him everything in detail. I spoke slowly, carefully, and at some point I felt my voice tremble again. But not from fear, but from some kind of senile resentment. The kind that builds up over the years, when you help give, endure, and in return, all you get is the desire to take everything. Do you have video recordings? He asked. Yes, I said, almost whispering. Then you have a good chance. Don't worry. Don't open the door for them. And if they come again, don't call me. Call the police straight away. The police. I always thought I wouldn't have to call anyone until I was old. To live quietly, peacefully, in my own little corner. It turns out that corner is the weakest spot if someone decides it belongs to them. After the call, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. I drank cold tea, then warmed it up again and let it cool again. In moments like these, time seemed to flow more slowly, as if the house was afraid to move even once, lest it disturb my thoughts. I looked at the old photographs hanging on the refrigerator. My husband smiling, his eyebrows raised. My daughter little in bows. My grandchildren still just babies, when they hugged me not out of politeness, but sincerely. What happens to people when they grow up? Where does that warm thread that binds us disappear? It breaks quietly, almost imperceptibly. And then one day you're left standing in front of a closed door, and someone demands your pension, as if you're an ATM, not a person. Towards evening, there was another knock. I flinched. But this time, it wasn't so rude. This time, it was my neighbor, Nina. She always arrived unexpectedly, with quick steps and the smell of fresh bread that she baked herself. "Open up, it's me," she said in her hoarse but kind voice. I let her in. She immediately sensed something was wrong. We older women have long since learned to read each other without words. She looked at me intently, squinting, as if trying to see into my soul. "Have you been crying?"
No.
I answered quietly, though it wasn't true. "Your eyes look tired. What happened?" And then, for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to tell her. Not completely, but enough for her to understand. She silently poured me tea, sat me down on a chair, covered me with a blanket. It was so homely that something inside me trembled. "They have no right, neither moral nor legal," Nina said sternly. "You're not alone." And I believed her, at least for the evening. When she left, a long, deep night fell, and with it, a silence in which you can even hear your own breathing. I tried to go to bed early, but sleep wouldn't come. The light from the street lamps fell on the ceiling, and every glimmer reminded me that the door had almost been kicked down that night. I listened to the wind, the old chimneys, every rustle. Old people sleep poorly, especially those who fear that the night will bring something new. I didn't know they would come again, that this was only the first act of their attempt to control my life. But something inside me told me that tomorrow would be worse. And there was a strange peace in that knowledge, because I was no longer the woman who was afraid. I was the woman who had set up the cameras, who had recorded, who had said no. Old but not broken. And they had yet to understand that. Before falling asleep, I quietly touched the framed photograph of my husband and whispered, "Well, darling, it seems we must hold on again." The house responded with a soft, barely audible creaking, as if in agreement. And I closed my eyes and prepared for tomorrow, for the second battle, for the fact that old age is not surrender, but endurance. And I was ready. Although my hands were still shaking, I woke up early, even before the first sparkle of morning broke through the window. It's hard to say whether it's from old age or anxiety. Perhaps it's both. With age, sleep becomes less restful and more of a pause between thoughts that never cease even at night. I sat on the edge of the bed, felt the cold creeping gently through my feet, and covered them with the woolen socks I'd knitted many years ago. Warmth, but not the kind that brings peace. The house was silent. That silence that only comes when we've lived alone for too long. It's as if it touches you, embraces you, and at the same time reminds you that there's no one waiting in the next room. No one will call you for breakfast. No one will ask if you slept well. I went into the kitchen. I heated the kettle. I put the cup on, and I felt my fingers still trembling. Not from fear, but from that inner tension that doesn't go away after the pain, but only changes shape. As soon as the kettle began to hum, I heard a notification on my phone. One short, dry beep. I looked, a message from my daughter. We overdid it yesterday, but it's your own fault. You're putting us in such a situation that we have no choice. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to figure out who she was trying to convince, me or herself. My fingers automatically typed a reply, but I erased it. Old age teaches silence. Sometimes it speaks louder than words. But my chest felt cold, as if someone's hand had settled there and squeezed, so tightly that it became hard to breathe. I sat down in a chair, turned on the CCTV monitor, and scrolled through the night's recordings. Empty. No one had come. Only a stray cat that walked across the porch and a gust of wind that slammed the barn door. But the very thought that they might come haunted me. Around 8 in the morning, there was a quiet, polite knock. This time it was soft, almost delicate. I turned on the camera at the entrance and saw a man in uniform on the screen. The police. I sighed and only then opened the door. "Good morning," he said, lowering his gaze slightly in respect. "We received the statement and the recording you provided. I wanted to clarify a few things." I invited him into the house. He sat carefully, as if afraid to tear the air. We talked for a long time. He asked questions I answered slowly, considering every word. I didn't want this to seem like a family squabble. This wasn't a squabble. It was an intrusion, an attempt to rob me of the life I'd spent decades building. He took notes. The marker glided softly across the paper. Occasionally, he'd look up, looking at me, as if I were someone who needed to be protected. And I hadn't felt like someone could protect me without reproach in a long time. When he left, I felt relief. But faint. It couldn't drown out the tension that was lingering within me. The day passed quietly, perhaps too quietly. Even the clock seemed to tick more slowly. And somewhere after lunch, I heard the sound of a car. Muffled, low, the kind you instantly recognize. My daughter's car. My heart first stopped, then began to beat faster. I went to the window and peered out cautiously. The two of them came out, the daughter and her husband. They were standing by the gate, talking quietly, nervously. I couldn't hear their words, but I could tell from their gestures. They were deciding how to talk to me again. I closed the curtain and headed for the camera monitor. I turned on the sound. "Let's just talk," my daughter said irritably. "She needs to understand that she can't decide everything herself." "Do you think she'll let us in?" her husband asked.
She will.
"She's a mother." These words cut deeper than any scream. She's a mother.
How easily they said it.
As if that gave them the right to do anything. They knocked. Sharply. Loudly. No longer politely. "Mom, open up." Her voice was taut as a string. I walked to the door. I felt the cold metal under my palm. But she didn't open it. She pressed the speakerphone button. "I hear you. What do you want?" A pause. A long one.
We need to talk, she said.
We already talked, I replied quietly. You sent the recording to the police. My son-in-law almost shouted. Are you trying to ruin our lives? I exhaled slowly. I want you to leave mine with me. Another pause. Much longer than the last. Even the wind died down. If you don't open the door now, he said threateningly, I interrupted. Everything you say will be recorded. The cameras are running, and the sound is on. He fell silent, and my daughter looked away as if searching for an explanation. Not for me, but for herself. We'll come later, when you're calmer, she finally said.
I'm calm, he replied quietly.
They left. The car drove off. The gravel crunched under the wheels for a long time, as if prolonging the moment. And when silence filled the yard again, I felt my legs give way. I sat down right on the floor by the door and sat there for a long time, hugging myself. I didn't cry. I just breathed.
Slowly, carefully.
Like someone who had survived great tragedy and now doesn't know what to do next. At that moment, I realized the house had become a fortress, and I, its guardian. And no matter what they thought, I was ready to stand firm to the end. That evening Nina came. She brought soup. I didn't ask, she just sensed it. We sat in the kitchen, and she held my hand as if I were the little girl I once was. And it made something inside me tremble. You know, she said quietly, you're stronger than you think. I'm not strong. I just don't want to disappear. That's strength, she replied. When she left, the house fell silent again. But now it was softer, as if the house, too, understood that I was holding on as best I could. That night, I fell asleep faster than I expected. But in the middle of my sleep, I heard a knock. Not loud, barely perceptible. I woke up. I looked at the monitor and saw someone standing at the gate. Not my daughter, not my son-in-law, and not my neighbor. A figure, unknown, too close to the house. And then, for the first time in a long time, I was truly afraid. But this fear was almost calm, because I knew I was prepared. The cameras were rolling, recording. The phone was lying nearby, and I quietly whispered into the darkness. Well then, if you've decided to teach me, then I'm afraid the lesson will be yours. That night, I woke up without the sound of the alarm, without the usual creaking of the floorboards, as if someone had called me. Not with a voice, but with a feeling, as if the air in the house had changed, become denser, more alert. The silence is always different at night, but that night it was alive. I rose slowly. My knees trembled slightly. The years were catching up, but I leaned on the armrest and stood. I found my glasses by touch. My hand automatically reached for the security camera monitor. On the screen, a grainy image, backlit at night, whitish, as if covered in frost. And at the gate, the same dark figure. It stood motionless, as if listening to the house. I felt a strange calm. Not courage, no, that would be a strong word. More like acceptance. As if I'd lived too many years to be surprised that someone was trying to intrude on my quiet life again. I turned on the audio recording. A soft wind, the creak of the iron gate, and breathing. Yes, the slow, even breathing of a person standing and waiting. I walked to the window, but didn't look out. I just lifted the edge of the curtain slightly. The shadow on the gate seemed to move, stretching, as if the person had taken a step closer. My insides tightened. But I didn't retreat. Who is it? I thought. A daughter wouldn't have stood like that. A son-in-law even less so. They always arrived noisily, indignantly, confident in their rights. But this figure was quieter than the night. And then there was a sound, a soft click, as if someone had touched the gate lock, testing it. Fingers cold, alien, reaching out to where my territory began. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. I dialed a familiar number. Duty station, we're listening. It's me again. My voice wavered, but I held it in. There's a man standing at the gate for several minutes. I'm alone at home. The cameras are recording. They promised to send a crew. They said, don't go near the door. And I obeyed. Not because I was afraid, no, but because I had a feeling that this night had to be done right. Carefully, discreetly. And while I waited for the police, I sat on the edge of my chair, listening to every rustle. The house seemed to breathe with me. The old walls groaned slightly from the night chill, but I heard support in their sounds. So many years of my life were within them, so many past winters, so many storms endured, that I felt not alone, but protected. A few minutes later, headlights illuminated the street. The figure at the gate twitched. You could tell by the shadow. Then it turned and quickly disappeared toward the neighboring houses. When the policeman entered my house, he said, "You did the right thing. It's better not to ignore such things." We reviewed the footage. I looked at the shadow, that motionless, seemingly shapeless figure, and felt a shudder. But not fear, no. More like regret. Because a person standing at 3 a.m. at an elderly woman's gate is unhappy. In their own way. In a dark way. But unhappy. If a burglar had wanted to break in, they would have chosen a different time, the policeman said. It was either a neighbor or someone they knew. Maybe they just wanted to scare you. Scare you. Echoed inside me. I walked them to the threshold, and then was alone again. And only then, in the early morning, when the sky had brightened a little, did I realize that I no longer wanted to be afraid. Fear is like a cold fog. It envelopes you only when you sit and wait. But if you walk, even slowly, even with brittle knees, it recedes. Nina came in the morning. She brought bread, milk, and a strong hug. "You're pale," she said. "You need to be with people, not sit alone in this paradise of old photographs."
He smiled ahead.
But those words were etched into my heart. To the people. But what kind of people? Those who come to me with threats? Those who consider my pension their property? Or maybe those who stand at the gate at night? No, there are other people. Some are kind. Some are considerate. Those who don't demand but give. But I still have to meet them. During the day, I decided to go out into the garden, not to hide at home. Without wrapping myself up, I slowly walked along the flower bed, touched the dry rose branches, remembered their summer bloom, and felt a quiet gratitude for being able to see the colors, hear the wind, feel the earth beneath my feet. I stood in the garden, and in that moment I realized, home isn't the walls. It's you, as much as you can keep yourself calm. A week passed. My daughter didn't come. My son-in-law didn't either. They were silent, as if they had disappeared. Only once did a short message arrive. "We'll figure out how to communicate from now on." I stared at those words for a long time. Each one was like a tiny prick. But the pain was different now. Not offensive, but weary. That same week, I decided to talk to a lawyer, just to understand my rights, so that no one could come to me again and say, You owe me. The lawyer turned out to be a patient, kind man. He said, You have the right to live peacefully. No one can dispose of your home except you. If necessary, we will put everything under legal protection. I sat across from him, listening, and felt something warm ignite inside. Not confidence, no, but trust in the world. At least a little. I returned home in the evening. I sat in an armchair. I turned on a soft lamp. And suddenly, for the first time in a long time, I felt the silence not as loneliness, but as peace. But when I looked at the cameras, routinely scrolling through the day's footage, I saw something so fleeting, a shadow, fast, pasting along the fence. It flickered for just a second, but that was enough to understand. The story wasn't over yet, and nothing inside me wavered. Only a deep, steady decision. I will not leave my home, not to anyone. Time passed, the kind that flows not in days, but in internal changes. Sometimes it seems to me that it doesn't move forward, but rather pulls us along with it, sometimes gently, and sometimes it pounces like a strong wind. Now my days have become quieter, but it's a different kind of silence. Not oppressive, but protected. I've started going out into the garden more often. Sometimes I stand for a long time, leaning against the railing, listening to the rustling of the dry grass. Sometimes I sit on a bench and look out onto the road, not because I'm waiting for someone, but because I just want to watch life go by. Neighbors have started dropping by more often. Not too intrusively, but kindly. They'd bring a pie or news. And I suddenly realized that loneliness isn't a punishment. It only becomes a punishment when there are people around who take away your peace. But when there are those around who give it, loneliness turns into freedom. My daughter finally arrived. One quiet Sunday. Unannounced. But no longer with screams, no longer with reproaches. She stood in the doorway, like a hesitant girl, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time, confusion. Mom, she said quietly. I've been thinking a lot. I gestured for her to enter the house. She walked in hesitantly, as if afraid to disturb the air. We sat opposite each other. Two women, separated by years and pain, but still connected by something important. You understand, I didn't mean to hurt you, she said. I understand, I replied. And it was true. Sometimes people hurt, not because they're evil, but because they're blind. She lowered her head. It was hard for me. I thought I could solve your problems my way, but it turned out the way it did. I slowly, carefully touched her hand. You don't have to solve my problems. I have fewer of them than you think. And she cried, for the first time in years. And I stroked her hand, as if she were little again. And I felt that in that moment we were both healing. We talked for a long time.
No arguing. No complaints.
Just sharing what had been building up. She left in the evening, promising to come more often. And for the first time in a long time, I believed she would keep her promise. My son-in-law didn't come. He didn't apologize. But I decided not to hold a grudge against him. Sometimes forgiveness isn't a gift to someone. It's a gift to yourself. As for that figure in the night, it never showed up again. The police never found anyone. Maybe it was a tramp. Maybe it was the neighbor's teenager. Maybe they weren't trying to scare me at all. They were just passing by. I didn't dwell on it. I didn't look for meaning where there might not be any. But I left the cameras. And not because I'm afraid. Because now, for me, they're not protection from others, but a sign that I have a right to safety. Some evenings, I sit in a chair, covered with a blanket, and listen to the ticking of the clock. And I feel the house breathing around me. Every wall, every corner is part of my life. My years, my steps, my thoughts, they're absorbed into the wood, into the plaster, into the lamplight. And now I know one simple, quiet truth. Home is not a place to return to. Home is a place that has endured you. And I have endured everything that has befallen me, not because I'm strong, but because I always told myself, I have a right to my life. I've lived for many years. I've seen a lot. I've suffered.
Evelect.
I've lost.
Eveloved.
And I thought that old age was a path to extinction. But it turned out no. Old age is a path to truth. To that quiet inner truth we hide our entire lives and only begin to hear at the end. I don't know what will happen next. Maybe there will be more difficulties. Maybe fears will return. Maybe I'll have to defend my right to be myself again. But now I'm not afraid, because I've learned the most important thing. Don't give up your life to those who want to control it. Don't give up your home to those who claim it as theirs. Don't silence your voice, even if it trembles. I live in my home, in my silence, in my truth. And that is enough.